Greetings again, my friends, and welcome back to Christian Wilderness. Now, what are we going to talk about today? We are going to talk about Satan. Scary, right? Well, I don't think it needs to be too scary. In fact, I think there might be a different way of thinking about the Bible and where Satan is mentioned and similar concepts that might clarify a little bit about evil and sin and those kinds of things. Now, again, I know this is a little bit fringe. It's a little bit outside the box of orthodoxy. I appreciate that. The standard Christian view of Satan, demons, devil, etc., is that there is a guy called Satan, that's his name, and that is kind of running the evil operations of the world. Like he's a criminal mastermind, basically. I understand that that's the normal view. However, there is a growing, I would say, body of Christians out there who have an alternative view. And I think the amount of people that are now holding this alternative view is growing quite quickly. There's a lot of progressive Christians, mainly Protestant. I think there's some Quakers. I've noticed a lot of preterists hold this view because obviously, like, preterists feel that Satan's been defeated and all the rest of it. So there definitely is no Satan today for those who hold a preterist view. But um, Unitarians, Universalists tend to have this view as well. In fact, there's an entire Christian denomination who this alternative view of Satan is actually one of their core doctrines or views. That's Christadelphians. So I'm going to hopefully show you that Satan, devil, demons, it doesn't necessarily mean what you think it might mean. And again, that you may not be convinced by this, that's fine. I just want to help you to maybe understand why some people might hold this view, that's all. Um, so let's have a look and see what we can see about this issue. Definitely believe in Jesus, but maybe not the other guy. Okay, I'm not sure about the other guy. So I've mentioned this before to Christians, and they seem to be quite surprised and a little bit dogmatic on it. It's like some Christians are almost as dogmatic that you believe in Satan as God or Jesus. So again, just want to help to show what this is like my fourth heresy, if you like. I'm working my way towards the perfect seven, but why do some people think that Satan is not an actual person, a real guy? Um, why is he not this personality, this character who's kind of running the opposing team, if you like? So I just want to show you this foundational text that I think I take this, it's about sin, okay, and temptation, and where does sin come from? Does it come from external outside influences or forces, supernatural forces, or is it generated within us? So James 1, it says, but each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. So, some people think, oh, there's a danger to not believing that Satan is a real dude out there, kind of causing people to sin. But I kind of view it the other way around, that I'm looking to be accountable for my own sin rather than blame it on someone external to me. So let's have a look at another one. This is in Mark 7. This is Jesus talking, and he said, what comes out of a person is what defiles him. So it's not what's external that goes in that defiles him, it's what comes out of a person that defiles him. For from within, out of the heart of man, come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, etc., etc. All these evil things come from within and they defile a person. So we're going to have to, we might be seeing a contradiction in the Bible here. There's a lot of stuff about Satan, devil, etc. But we've also got these texts which seem to say on the surface that, all this stuff comes from inside us and we are the source of temptation and sin and all the rest of it. So this is another one where we might need to kind of dig in a little bit and have a look and see if we can marry up these things and kind of consolidate them into a cohesive kind of package of what we think about Satan and all the rest of it. So, is he a real person? We need to explore this. We need to see what the Bible truly says about all of these terms and the meaning of these terms. So, Satan, the devil, demons. Are we actually talking about supernatural beings, individual beings here? Or is there another way to look at it? I mean, I've got a few philosophical issues I might point out. Um, First of all, does God really have control over Satan, or is he running amok if he's a real guy? Not so sure about that. Satan, this sinful creature, Satan, gets to live kind of throughout the ages, which I'm not really sure about. And why are we getting punished for sin that kind of originates with this Satan character also? So just a few questions there. Now, if we go to the definition of the word Satan, it simply means adversary. It's a Hebrew word that was brought over into the New Testament. It means adversary or accuser. It's a verb, basically. It's a descriptor. So it means to accuse someone or an adversary, to act as an adversary, to be the opposer, to oppose. So not necessarily a supernatural being. We've got examples in the Bible, like stories about Satan, like in Job, where this Satan, this accuser or adversary, is kind of challenging Job's faithfulness. And we've got someone opposing the high priest in Zechariah. And we're going to go through a couple of examples here. So that's what to keep in mind, that Satan, or Hasatan in Hebrew, it's a descriptor word. It's not like the name of a person. So hopefully I'm going to prove that. So we're going to look at the definition of Satan. It means adversary. We've just seen that. We're going to see what it kind of represents: opposition to someone or something. It doesn't even have to be evil opposition to good stuff, as I'm going to show. And just a quick word about the book of Job. Um, Satan's the Satan is only mentioned in the first couple of chapters there, and nowhere in the book is he actually described as like an angel or anything. At the beginning of the book, it says that the sons of God came before God. I mean, I just take that as meaning God's people came before him, like those people who have an understanding of God. And it's not really a heavenly setting. So it's all kind of on earth, the whole story. Like the major theme of the book is like God brought the problems for Job. It's God that did it, and he kind of empowered this adversary character to do it. Actually, if you talk to Jews, they don't really see, they see the book of Job as a kind of wisdom book. Like they see it as a kind of a story narrative. They don't even see it as like an actual historical narrative. I'm happy to take it as a historical narrative, but I just thought I'd add that in there. And by the way, like evil stuff can come from God. When we say evil, it can mean like sad or chaotic stuff. For example, in book of First Samuel, um, God brought a sad spirit to Saul. In some translations, it says an evil spirit. So God can bring mood changes. In Isaiah, it says, I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and I create evil, which can basically be translated. Evil is kind of calamity and chaos. So God can create calamity or affliction. So what I'm trying to say is like he's in complete control there. So this is another kind of, these are key texts here where I'm going to try and show that anyone can be a adversary, a Satan. So in 2 Samuel 24, it says, again, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he incited David against them, saying, go number Israel and Judah. And then in a parallel text in First Chronicles, it says, then Satan stood against Israel and incited David to number Israel. Now, I don't want to shock people, but here it seems to be that God is the adversary in this situation. I mean, it seems pretty clear to me that God is the Satan in this situation. He's the adversary, he's the opposer that is making David do something. So this might come as a bit of a surprise to people, that things like this can be found in the Bible. So it's God that was making David number the people. He was the Satan there in that text. Let's have a look at another one. This is Numbers 22. But God's anger was kindled because he went, and the angel of the Lord took his stand in the way as the Satan. the adversary. It's the word Satan in the Bible. And in again, a parallel text is First Kings, and the Lord raised up an adversary, Satan, against Solomon, and it says who the adversary was: Hadad the Edomite. So here, a man was the Satan, and in Numbers, it's an angel of the Lord was a Satan. So we've got different people being Satans here. I'm not sure that is a parallel text, actually. That's just two more examples where Satan is a person in one, and a messenger of the Lord. That might be a person as well, or it might be a supernatural being, but it's doing a job for God. So we just need to handle this word with a little bit of care, Satan, because clearly it is a flexible word and is not pointing to one single person. I mean, a good example from the New Testament is in Matthew 16, where Jesus calls Peter Satan. So I don't think he's actually saying that Peter is a supernatural evil being. And I really don't think that he's trying to point out that an external supernatural supervillain has jumped into Peter temporarily. He's simply saying that you are being adversarial to me at the moment, and it looks like the word Satan kind of continued to be, or became, a kind of name for someone who was adversarial. Just like we have little nicknames for people like the boogeyman or whatever, that in 2,000 years' time, they probably will have no clue what that means. So meanings can get lost over time, but I think the Bible shows my point here that I'm trying to make. So this kind of brings a new take on this, doesn't it? He's saying Peter is an adversary to him in that moment. So that's Satan. I'm trying to be as brief as possible. I want to keep these videos under an hour. I want to race through it. But people often talk about Lucifer. So where does that come from, Lucifer, and identifying him as Satan kind of is the same guy? I mean, more and more people know about this these days, and it's very easy to prove that this term Lucifer just means day star. And it's not talking about a supernatural being. It occurs one time in Isaiah, and it's actually describing the king of Babylon. But we see so much in the media and TV shows and stuff about Lucifer being the devil and Satan. Like, it's a simple misunderstanding. If you read the whole of Isaiah 14, you'll see, like, at the start, it identifies this person as the king of Babylon. And most modern translations don't even put in Lucifer, they put in Daystar. So Isaiah 14 is clearly talking about a man, not a supernatural being. He's talking about the Babylonian king who set his throne on high, ascending above the clouds, maybe a reference to the Tower of Babylon. Not fallen angels. I'm going to make a bold statement here. Angels of God cannot fall or go against God. I know people talk all the time about lightning that fell from heaven and things in Revelation. Very difficult book. Yeah, very symbolic. But angel, like anyone that is working for God, that is a supernatural being or that God sends, doesn't work against him. So for example, in Psalms 91, it says, "For he shall give his angels charge over thee to keep thee in all thy ways." Um, in Psalms 103, it says, "Bless ye the Lord, all his hosts, ye ministers that do his pleasure." In Hebrews 1, it says, "But to which of my angels said he at any time, sit on my right hand until I make thine enemies your footstool?" And are they not all ministering spirits? So that's what I think God's angels are. They're all ministering spirits. They're not, they can't go completely against God and be supernaturally empowered and then work against God, because all power comes from God. So who is this Satan that falls from heaven in Revelation? The dragon, the serpent. Well, in my view, the book's all about the end of the old covenant age, as I kind of hinted at in my last video about full preterism. So where's this kind of character that we all think is a supernatural evil villain? Where's it first mentioned? So when did that old covenant start? And in my opinion, which I might get to in another video, which is quite controversial, it started in the garden with Adam and Eve. So who's this snake in the garden, the talking snake? Uh, this can be a bit of a tricky one. I think Genesis is actually quite difficult, and I've had a different opinion on it recently. I think people would do well to just have another look at it, because it might be quite symbolic, or the way that it's structured in more modern translations might be a touch misleading. So, snake is used figuratively many times in the Bible. Like, it's used to describe the tribe of Dan, invaders, evil people, even the nations. So in Genesis 3:15 it says, "I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise its heel." So I don't think this can be an actual snake, right? Because otherwise, are we battling against a reptile in the kingdom? I think the serpent has to be figurative or a symbol of something else. So it can't be a literal animal. And besides, everything that was created in the garden was seen by God to be very good. That's in Genesis 1:31. So this snake, whoever or whatever it was not under the law. So I don't think he'd be punished under the law if sin came into the world by a snake. That, like, we're putting all the blame on the snake and not the man. So an alternative view of Genesis 3 is like that the serpent it provides a kind of animation, like a caricature of the thoughts maybe of Eve, which produced the sin. That's my take on it. And I think there's a growing body of scholarship that has this view that maybe it's not as physically literal as we normally take it to be. I mean, the word serpent kind of, it can mean to hiss or to whisper or to prognosticate. So was it kind of an inner voice kind of a thing, or was it someone outside coming in and maybe planting a few seeds of doubt? Like, I don't think that Adam and Eve were the first human beings ever. So maybe there was an outsider that was kind of talking to them, someone outside of the covenant. There's different ways to handle that one, I would say. Right, let's get on to devil. I want to kind of keep going. Devil means slanderer, it means false accuser. Okay, that's the definition of it. And we can see with examples that it's not referring to a supernatural being. So in John 6, Jesus says, "Did I not choose you, the 12, and yet one of you is a slanderer, is a devil?" And he spoke of Judas, okay, and said that you're going to be the one to betray me. So here, Judas is a slanderer, a devil. In 1 Timothy 3, it says that women should not be, they should be sober minded in all things, dignified, and not devils, which is translated as slanderers. Okay, in the next one here, we've got 2 Timothy, and it says again that people will be lovers of self, etc., arrogant, abusive. They'll be slanderers, devils. It's the same word, devil. So I think this is another verb, guys. A devil is just a word for someone who is a slanderer. Okay. Now you're thinking, what about Jesus when he was taken by the Spirit into the wilderness, right? And was tempted by the devil. So in Hebrews 4, it says, "We do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who is in every respect has been tempted as we are, without sin." And again, in Mark 7, it says, "It's from within, out of the heart of man come evil thoughts." So, I don't want to offend people with saying kind of what I'm going to have to say, a little bit of an unorthodox thing about Jesus, and that is that he was capable of being tempted. Okay, I think a lot of Christians don't want to think about this, but he had temptation thoughts in his head, what you might call evil thoughts. I mean, if he was tempted like we are, we know we have evil thoughts and are tempted. So why wouldn't he, if he was made exactly like us, why wouldn't he have thoughts like us? I mean, I know the story in the wilderness is a little bit out there, but if he's tempted like us, I mean, when was the last time that a supernatural supervillain appeared to you and physically showed you all the things your heart desired? Actually, in real life. Was the story a parable? What was it kind of hyperbole? No one was there to witness a supernatural villain, right? So did Jesus come back from the wilderness and kind of describe the event as in a way that the people would understand? Because devil in their time may have meant the slanderous voice inside your head, right? Rather than an external, actual personal being. So I think that Jesus told the story in a kind of a parable form, like a cartoon caricature kind of form, and he was describing things that he was maybe thinking. That's my take on it. I just think the temptations in the wilderness are very, very hard to take literally. I mean, he was led up into a high mountain to see all the kingdoms of the world. He was taken to the top of the temple, what, like, with no one noticing any of this. He talked about like this temptation of turning stones into food, and we know that he was fasting out there in the wilderness. So that would be quite an easy one for you to come to mind. Maybe he was thinking to himself, "Oh, why don't I just turn stones into food?" And that was a kind of temptation thought there. Am I making sense? So I think Jesus maybe told the New Testament writers the record of his temptations, and he could have used kind of a figurative approach to describe his own internal dialogue. So, this personification of thoughts or, internal thinking is not uncommon, or sides of your character. Like, you only have to look at Proverbs and wisdom to see the personification of a trait in your character, or in God's character in that case. Wisdom is described as a woman that's been with God and was there, and it's described like a person. An alternative take on the temptation in the wilderness is that an actual person, but not a supernatural person, maybe like a Pharisee, came to see him in the wilderness, like they did with John the Baptist. And Jesus is just describing them as a kind of slanderous character that came and kind of tempted him with being like the king of the Jews, like a physical king of the Jews sitting on a throne, and was kind of saying, "Oh, if you're the son of God, can you jump off this temple and angels will save you," and that kind of thing. I kind of lean towards the first interpretation, that it was actually internal dialogue. But it's a strong argument that maybe a Pharisee wandered into the wilderness and started tempting him with various stuff. I mean, who is the enemy in the whole New Testament? The enemy, kind of sin, death, the law, which is the power of sin and death, the ministration of death. And the Pharisees were kind of the ones who were always pushing the old law. First Corinthians says the sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. Romans 8 says the law is an instrument of sin and death for those who are still married to their old selves. And it also says the law of sin and death is set free by the law of the Spirit. So, the big enemy that Jesus came to set us free from was the old ways, the old law, the way of doing things in rituals to please God, and that you actually need to love your neighbor as yourself is the new law. But the Pharisees were stuck in that old way. So I think there's a good case to be made. They were the ministers of the old law. They were the main opponents of Jesus, the villains, if you like, the villains of the story. People will often bring up 1 Peter, which says, "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walks about seeking who he may devour." But again, that can just be talking about a person who's who's a slanderer. I mean, the Emperor Nero was slandering Christians, blaming them for all sorts of things, and using them as candles, lighting up his garden. It could be the Pharisees again, who is the adversary there. You see how like the concept of Satan and the devil are kind of linked together there. Your adversary, the devil. So it's all kind of mixed up in the same concept. Just to give you an example from Ezekiel 22, there is a conspiracy of her prophets in the midst thereof, like a roaring lion ravening the prey. They have devoured souls. So that's talking about actual people, not supernatural villains. It's talking about the conspiracy of her prophets. Okay, so moving on, you know, persons of sin can be talked of as devilish or adversarial. So in John 13 it says, and supper being ended, the devil having now put into the heart of Judas Iscariot. So the devil's put something in the heart of Judas here. Now, where can we find clarification of who this devil was? Look at Matthew 26 here. Then one of the 12, whose name was Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, what will you give me if I deliver him over to you? And they paid him 30 pieces of silver. And from that moment, he sought an opportunity to betray him and to slander him, basically. So it seems pretty clear there that who was the people who put it in Judas' heart to slander Jesus and to betray him? It was the chief priests. Or maybe the chief priest. This was the devil who put it into the heart of Judas. Okay? Devil means kind of sin in the flesh. It's the thing which falsely accuses God. Okay? Because it says God is unjust for kind of condemning us to death in the form of separation. That's my take on it. So it's sinful tendency. All right, let's have a look at a verse comparison here. Hebrews 2 says, since therefore the children share in flesh and blood, he himself likewise, Jesus, partook of the same things, that through death he might destroy the one who has the power of death, that is the devil, and deliver all those who through fear of death were subject to lifelong slavery. So who's the devil there? You know, in James 1, it says each person is tempted when he's lured and enticed by his own desire. So we have devil and Satan inside of us. You know, a good quote that I saw a few weeks back was, if you want to see Satan, go into the bathroom and look in the mirror, because there's a bit of Satan in all of us. There's a bit of devil there. It's simply your own desires, your own fleshly way kind of thing. Sin brings forth death. Devil is kind of sin personified, if you like. Again, sin falsely accuses God. So every time we sin and transgress the perfect spiritual law of love, your neighbor, we're kind of arrogantly saying to ourselves, God doesn't care, or he'll let me off. You know, that's a false accusation of God's character. It slanders him. It's devilish to think that. But when we're strong in love, we don't sin. When we're weak, we slip and we kind of fall back into that. All right. I hope I'm making this a little bit clearer here. That there's no need to read the texts in the Bible that describe Satan and the devil as a singular kind of supernatural character that is a person who's running the show, opposing God. I really don't think that can be, because that sounds extraordinarily godlike, right? And there's no one like God. You know, the closest you'll get is Jesus, who's a kind of a representation of God's character, but got all his power from God, right? And angels get their power from God. You can't have someone on the opposing side, I don't think, that is supernaturally empowered to make people sin. I think all that comes from inside us. Okay? Now, moving on to demons. Okay? I think I've got a decent explanation for this as well. Now, I know, again, it's a bit of a taboo subject. A lot of people like to think of demons as spiritual super characters, like individual beings that they can kind of, you know, cast out. And there is talk of casting out demons, okay, in the Bible. I'm not denying that you can cast out demons, but I don't think demons are actual spiritual individual beings. Okay, demon, in the Greek, demon can mean a god, but we know there's no other gods than God Almighty, okay, or an inferior deity. We believe, Christians should do, I think, believe that there's one God Almighty, okay, which I believe is the Father, okay. But in the New Testament, according to Thayer's Greek lexicon, it means an evil spirit. Now, what does that actually mean, an evil spirit? As I noted before, King Saul was given an evil spirit by God, which kind of means a bad mood, okay, or mental instability, going through a bit of stuff. God caused that on Saul. What does evil spirit actually mean? I mean, if you look at our modern language, we still say stuff today like he's in bad spirits, don't we? Or, that's the spirit, right? Non-Christians say this as well, atheists. It's just a turn of phrase, or oh, this will lift your spirits. It just means it will lift your mood, or that's the spirit, means that's the mood that I'm looking for. He's in bad spirits, he's in a bad mood, kind of thing. What do we really mean by when we use spirit? If we use that today, why can't it be true of 2,000 years ago? Yeah, as we get a lot of our phraseology from the Bible. Okay, so external spiritual beings, not so much. Maybe it just means a mood. Yeah. So a person who has a demon in them, a demoniac, if you like, the definition is to be demon possessed, to possess an evil mood, if you like, or mental state. So again, Thayers says in the New Testament, persons afflicted with especially severe diseases, either bodily or mental. So if you read verses that involve demons in that light, it brings a new angle on it, doesn't it? Now, if you continue reading Thayers there, it says such as paralysis, blindness, deafness, loss of speech, epilepsy, melancholy, insanity, all mental conditions. And some people might say, well, that's caused by actual demons, which are spiritual external creatures or beings that jumped into their body. And Thayers there says that in the opinion of the Jews, demons have entered them. But what did the Jews mean by demons there? It could just mean that a bad mood entered them, but in a spiritual sense. Like, again, we use funny turns of phrase ourselves. So, regardless of what the Jews believed, I don't think the Bible teaches spiritual creatures, individuals, jump into the body of people. I think people get taken over by bad moods, but that, again, it comes from the inside, not the outside. It might be influenced from outside factors that affect our lives, but really it's us allowing it and helping it to grow with our own thoughts. So it may be that they personified various moods, mental illnesses, even physical maladies, as kind of exterior beings. They personified it that way. This might have been a common cultural thing. Again, the things that we say today, he's got another side to him. What does that mean? It doesn't mean that I think someone's got an actual physical other side to him. It's just a turn of phrase. Or we can say, that's not the real him. You haven't seen the real him. He's not himself these days is another one that we kind of use. What do we really mean by those things? We don't mean that an exterior person is actually filling his shell that is his body these days. We're just saying he's had a mood swing, right? So, my premise that I want to give you is that in the New Testament, demons are seen as symbols, kind of illnesses and inner spiritual disturbances. Again, I want to emphasize how far we are away from their culture and the times of writing of the New Testament. We might not have all the same sayings, but similarly to them, we use a lot of symbolic and metaphoric language. You know, skeletons in your closet sounds very macabre, doesn't it? And serious. Yeah, he's got some inner demons. Yeah, even atheists say that. He's got some serious darkness inside of him. We're not talking about material light and darkness, are we? The word lunatic incorporates the word lunar, but we don't still think that it's got anything to do with the moon. Although you could argue that some women have a monthly cycle that affects their mood a lot, but we still use that word today, lunatic. But it doesn't mean what maybe sometimes we thought it might mean in past times. People who don't care about the Bible use that word a lot. So I don't think the Bible is pandering to superstitious thoughts, but it's simply describing illnesses in ways that their language at the time allowed. The Bible doesn't teach, in my opinion, actual exterior individual beings entering humans. Now, I just want to ask you a question that you can have a think about. How would you describe someone? How would you describe schizophrenia using biblical language? How would you describe that without using modern technical scientific terms? I might describe it as saying, well, he's got his person, but there is another person living in him. Yeah. Which, I mean, if you look at the way that, you know, demons is used in the Bible, it kind of sounds like that, doesn't it? If we say someone's got a demon in them, it's basically saying that he's got a split personality. But we don't actually think of schizophrenia as two people living in one guy. We think of it as a mental state, right? At least I hope we do. Epilepsy. Epilepsy, I think it comes from a word that means moonstruck. Again, it's to do with lunatic. Madness, arthritis, things like that. Even a physical disability is given a spiritual dimension in the Bible. In Luke 13, it says, and there was a woman who had a disabling spirit for 18 years. She was bent over and could not fully straighten herself. It's just a simple physical malady, but it's called a disabling spirit. So again, you see that like even a physical condition was given like a personification. Some Christians might say that all schizophrenic people are actually possessed by demons. But how can that be viable when literally all of us veer away from our normal character from time to time? You know, are we really having external individual beings jumping in and out of our body and taking over our mind? I don't think that's viable, really. So, to wrap up, okay, I think there's some popular beliefs about Satan as this kind of fallen angel that rules over hell, and he's also the devil, which is like a supernatural evil being, super villain, who's causing all the temptation, and the demons are his like malicious underlings or whatever that are going around as his kind of army. But I don't think that's the case. I think Satan is an adversary. Okay, it's used clearly in the Bible as a descriptive verb, and even with the word the Satan is, it's talking about the adversary in that actual situation. So it's not the name of a person. The devil just represents sin and temptation. I think the core thing is that evil stems from human choices, and God is sovereign over the supernatural world. Sin originates from within us. It's not influenced by supernatural external beings. It can certainly be influenced by other normal humans who might influence us in certain ways, but we ultimately are the ones who sin, and we've got to take responsibility for our sin. So we are tempted from within with our own thoughts and our own desires. Okay? Thanks for watching. Let's just remember, when we're dealing with topics that might be considered fringe or unorthodox, just to bear with one another. Yeah? With meekness, with humility. I might change my mind on this again and go back to thinking that Satan is a super force individual, super villain running the world. Who knows? But at the moment, this is my view. So it's not something to separate on. Let's keep the unity of the body and just not separate over these things. All right? Thanks, guys. I'll see you in the next one.